I think the show is finally starting to come together for me. To me, hands down, episode 4 of Big Sky, Unfinished Business is the title, is my favorite episode of the season. I think the show is finally doing the things that I've been complaining about. I've been complaining about, Cassie not having enough screen time or us not really understanding the character. This episode goes into Cassie and her background and who she is. Some of my issues with Ronald. Ronald is way more formidable in this episode than he's been thus far outside of his abilities with a taser gun. And as the Richard Cheney pointed out in the comments last week, he is really good at working the machine where he's digging holes.
Excavator.
There you go. uh, and there were almost no Danny in this episode. She only had a couple lines of dialogue. So like all the things I complained about were sort of addressed this week. I was like, wow, Jenny and Cassie actually doing stuff. The plot is going somewhere. Things are getting very interesting. How did you feel about this episode in terms of quality compared to the previous episodes? I know you've been enjoying it a little more than I have. But yeah, how did you feel about this episode?
Well, my only gripe was that the scenes with Cassie and Jenny felt a little like hokey, but almost like a little slapsticky, like when they were talking to Walter and there's like, I should throw you guys in too, and they're like, for what? Like that whole sequence felt
little Walker Texas Ranger.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was just a little.
That was the first show that popped in my head, because that show could also have some serious stuff, but then you would have sort of that hokey kind of dialogue.
Every time I think of Walker's Texas Ranger, I just think of the episode with Haley Joel Osment.
Yeah, that was a meme. Yeah, crazy. Yeah. But that's the thing. That show would have like dialogue, like it would have like really serious storylines. In this sort of
ridiculous dialogue.
Yeah. It's a very odd show if anybody's ever seen it. But
that's
go ahead.
That's what that part of that scene reminded me of, was something like that. But the rest of the time, like Rick, you've slowly seen Rick so far, get closer and closer to that edge. But by the end of this episode, I had to look it up, because when he was standing next to Ronald and Ronald was like standing up to him, I'm like, how fucking big is Rick? That's a big dude. And he's, 6'4". He's a big guy.
Damn.
So yeah. Cause I thought he was bigger, but then like when Ronald walked up to him and was a head shorter than he was, I was like, damn, he's tall. So I looked it up just to see, but he is an imposing character. And then by the end of this episode, when you see him walking up the stairs with the hammer, it's his character, I feel, is finally, you're getting to the meat of who he really is, not who he's pretending to be, but who he really is and what he's really capable of. We can talk about it too, not yet, but there's a couple things he said that was implying this trafficking ring, he implied a couple names. Like he was, I think, implicating some people that are involved in this. And like you said, Ronald finally, that was one of my favorite scenes when he poured the bowl of cereal on his mom's head.
I love, dude, the cereal scene. Well, it was the dialogue before where he's like, I don't like to be disturbed or watched when I'm having my cereal.
Not when I'm watching my shows, when I'm eating my cereal. It was great.
But yeah, this is Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Spencer, and we've been reviewing Big Sky as it's been running. We will continue to do so throughout this season. If you've not hit the sub button, please do so you'll be notified, and hit the bell so you'll be notified when these reviews go up. A lot of other content on the channel. Your Honor, we're going to be starting The Stand. I believe it's next week, man. We're doing Mandalorian. So a lot of different content on the channel. Please leave a like and a comment. That would definitely help push the video. And yeah, let's get back into it. Did you know that was Rick's wife? Did you realize it? I didn't.
No, it took me a second, because I was talking to my wife about it. I was like, we were talking and she knew immediately, but it took me a second. I was like, wait, isn't that Rick's wife? She said, yeah, you didn't know? And I said, no, I didn't. But it was like halfway through the conversation before I figured it out.
Dude, I didn't figure it out till she walked in the house at the end. I was sitting there and I'm like, what is happening? Like he goes to the store and for a moment I'm like the dialogue, it's a little odd and creepy, but I thought the scene was really well done when he's, buying the quilt. But I couldn't figure out what his angle was. And then when we get to the dance, I mean that if some people have compared this show, to like Twin Peaks, and it's not at all like Twin Peaks, but that scene was the way that dance was laid out. It had a very Twin Peaksy vibe, and so I'm like, what the hell's going on? And so then I start thinking, well, maybe Ronald on the side sort of picks up women and then kills them. And that was my thought. Okay, that's the story they're going to tell. But then, no, that's not it at all. This was all planned. And he's just effing with Rick. And I'm sitting there realizing it when she walks in the house at the end. And I'm like, oh, my God. Like, Ronald, dude. Like, holy shit.
Well, when he was talking to Rick and telling him, basically not to fuck with him. And then once I figured out, it took me a minute, like I said, but once I figured out he was in there talking to his wife, I started dying laughing. I was thinking that's how he's going to fuck with him. He's obviously not going to fist fight Rick, but he can hurt Rick in way more underhanded ways. And unless she took a picture, he would never know that it was Ronald that she went and danced with. Like, yeah. So it's even better that he is fucking with them without ever implicating himself. It's so great.
And the fact that you're right, going to the final scene, there were actually a couple different sort of cliffhangers in this episode, and one of them being Rick walking up the stairs with the hammer, leading to, is he going to do it? Is he going to murder his wife, which would escalate his situation, substantially if he does that. Maybe he won't. It could have been, just a fake out. But he definitely looks like he was thinking about it. But yeah,
he walks up the stairs and just like hangs up a picture.
I mean, look, we did The Undoing, which was a show I enjoyed. But there were several episodes that ended in a way which, left you with this big cliffhanger, and then it turned out to not be anything significant going into the next episode. So this could be that, maybe not. I don't know. This show is very fast paced. I kept saying that the last couple weeks. This episode too. Like I checked my clock. Like wow, it's wrapping up. But yeah, Ronald definitely stepped up his game this week. We've been calling him pathetic. And he still is, but he's starting to get this evil, let the evil do the work. And he's starting to take all his horrible thoughts and actually apply some kind of intelligence to them. Now, in the end, I think it's going to destroy him, but his story has become more interesting.
I think what they're going to end up doing, we talk about procedural dramas and stuff. It feels as though if Cassie and Jenny, just like in the books, are the main characters, that this season, by the end of it, Ronald, Rick, like all of that storyline is going to be done. So to me, that would explain the more fast-paced nature of it, because, if Ronald's completely undone by episode 8, where are they going to go from there? So I think that they may, basically make this like a season to season, bad guy situation, or they may tie in like the overarching thing, like whoever it is that's actually controlling the trafficking, but I don't know what their, seasonal track is. I'm not sure, but I've liked the journey so far.
Well, going to as far as the overarching story of the human trafficking, we do get a line of dialogue where, Rick is telling Ronald, hey, somebody's coming to get the girls. We're not going to get money for it. They're just going to take them off our hands. And he references Canada again. They're coming from somewhere in Canada. So clear, the base of this operation has to be based in Canada. Very curious where that's going to go. Those guys are, I believe, on the way, so that should happen. I would say next week, as far as their arrival. We don't get much of Jerry, Grace, and Danny this week. We get a couple scenes. Grace still is my favorite character. I mean, she only has a few lines of dialogue, but they're great. The whole, this is gonna. What does he say? This is gonna something about a prick, and she's like, "You're the prick," or something like that, because he's giving her the shot.
I see an awfully big one in front of me, or something like that.
Yeah, it was just a great, quick little line. But
you're just gonna feel a small prick, and she said, "I see a small prick right in front of me now."
That was it.
Like that.
Yeah, it was just funny. I laughed out loud. I was like, oh, I was right last week in thinking that the leg wound was gonna factor in. It has. She's got an infection. She uses her intelligence to think about getting the maggots. But in the end, she definitely needs medicine, and Rick shows up to give her that medicine. That leads to earlier, Cassie and Jenny had put a tracker on his vehicle, and that leads to one of the other big sort of cliffhangers is they are actually there. They find the location. They're literally right on top of where the girls are, and yet they can't hear them. And they're still in the location. So yeah, next week, will they hear them? Will they go back, or will they leave the site? Yet again, it sort of leaves you hanging. What do you think?
Well, that I was talking about the other part being my only gripe. I kind of had a gripe about that. However, they did show that it was like storming outside. So my thing is they heard Jenny and Cassie basically walk in. They could hear them like stepping on there and like close the door. So how, if they were able to hear him basically move and drop like a vase, how were they not able to hear them like screaming and pounding on this wall? For them to be able to hear them inside of that container, but them not be able to hear them. The only thing that I could think of was that they showed when they walked in how windy it was. So maybe the wind's like howling through there or something. But they should have done that. They could have audibly done that on the show. Them standing inside of it, they could have mentioned it. They could have been like, man, it's getting really windy outside. I can't hear anything, something. But for her to be so close and then be like, well, thought I heard something, that to me was they should have alluded to that better, because to me, as kind of like a bullshit kind of scenario where one side could hear but they couldn't. But I don't know that they won't find them.
Yeah, and that was my thought was it leaves you hanging, but there's a strong chance that immediately when the episode starts next week that they do hear them. And I was thinking about that. I was like, that could happen. We're not really sure. Do you think that's what will happen, or do you think they'll leave the site? That would be crazy if they actually leave and they don't find them.
I don't know how they would be able to justify ever going back. Like if they, or maybe they get caught, like somebody shows up and they have to leave early and they're like, we got to come back. We haven't finished looking. I don't know how else they're going to end up back there, because if they don't find anything and they're adamant that they didn't, find them, then why would they ever go back? Cassie does say that she feels like she's missing a piece to a puzzle or something like that. She's so close to solving it or something. So maybe she knows that maybe she'll be the one that be like, hey, we got to go back. I feel, or I figured this piece of the puzzle out. I don't know for sure, but something's got to give as far as them at least figuring out that's where they're supposed to be.
Cassie, we finally get some more backstory on her. We find out, we have a couple conversations where she's speaking with her father, and how he basically trained her to the first conversation they're at, I believe, breakfast. And I think it was breakfast. And he was talking about how, are you in love with Cody? And I think it's my fault that I've sort of guided you to shut yourself off. And I was a little confused by that conversation, but it's clarified later because they have another conversation and we learned that her mother took her life when she was a young girl. And so her father dealt with that, and he, basically just tried to ignore it and move on. And I guess that's how he raised her. And then when her husband died, and he was a soldier overseas, and he was killed. She applied that, and now with Cody, who she's clearly in love with, we do in fact get another flashback of Cody, them having a.
So Ryan got paid this whole season just for flashbacks.
Hanging out with beautiful women and eating s'mores and just chilling like that. Yeah, like that's it.
Singing.
Like he didn't, there you go. That was his job. Yeah, I was laughing when that scene came on. I was laughing at that. Like, really? But they're trying to show that she is in fact in love with him, and yet again, this is another loss. She lost her mother. She lost her husband. Now she's lost her, Cody. So she's dealing with that. We're finally digging into this character and who she is, and like you said, her whole dialogue about the missing piece. We've been establishing that she has these detective skills. We still haven't dug into her quitting the academy and all that stuff yet. I'm assuming we will at some point, but
that could have just timed out right. Like whenever her husband died, it could have been while she was at the academy or getting ready to start or whatever. She may have quit not because she was bad, or it could have been, like traumatic reasons. Like some shit came up and she just couldn't finish. But they could explain that. That's a very simple line of dialogue. Being like, it was bad timing. That'd be it.
But finally, I finally feel like Cassie is taking the lead as a character. They're finally giving her screen time, finally building the character up. What are your views on the character in terms of the past 3 episodes and how they handled her specifically in this episode? Do you think it was an improvement, or how do you feel as far as, like I said, she's supposed to be the lead?
I don't know that I feel like she's the lead still. I feel like it's kind of like a co-lead type situation, because as much as they gave her screen time, it was all screen time with Jenny almost, with the exception of the one scene with her father and her kid.
2 scenes.
Yes. Not with her. It was just her dad, the second one, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. She went back and talked to him, and then he talked about the mom part and everything. But that those scenes weren't very long, so it felt like almost they were trying to give us insight with her, but it didn't feel like a lead type situation. It felt like they were trying to give her co-lead time. And prior to this episode, we didn't get a whole lot of any of individual time with her. So I felt like this episode, like you said, is trying to kind of push her forward as far as the focal point of the show. And I think, too, if what I was saying, the procedural kind of drama thing, or I guess not procedural, because that would be episodic, I guess seasonal drama. I don't know how to, each story arc is one season, but if they are going to make her the lead for the show for its entirety, they need to keep doing what they did this episode more. They need to kind of keep building her character, which I think from the beginning to now, they've done a lot. So, we were griping about it, but this episode kind of helped establish her a lot.
Yeah. For me, this was the episode where I've turned the corner and said, okay, I'm in. I just felt that the way the characters were handled was just very well done, and I enjoy a good villain, and I think Rick and Ronald have finally Rick has been since the beginning a great villain, but Ronald is finally impressing me as far as a villain is concerned. Jenny and Cassie, like you said, Jenny's sort of there also, almost like a sidekick. They go on a mission, a horribly planned mission. I didn't know exactly what they were going to try and do until they did it. Jenny dressed up as a prostitute, and she was going to go out to the truck stop and try and get in some of these trucks and get DNA evidence. But I was like, well, what would keep Why the whole angle of I'm a cop? Well, what if they question that? Like, you know what I mean? They didn't think it through. I'm like, they may be like, well, where's your warrants or where? It fell apart exactly how it should fall apart, and so I'm like, why was that your plan? It was a horrible plan, and it didn't go well. Now it had some fun dialogue because you had this trucker who was obsessed with hygiene. He was a fun character, and I like characters like that. You remind that now that's sort of a Twin Peaks type character, just this trucker who's obsessed with hygiene. He's got her, using the mouthwash, and I loved all that. That was great, but their actual plan was horrible, and it failed.
When he handed her that like sanitizing
Oh,
wipe,
dude,
I fucking
yeah.
lost it. Like,
We just like, are you clean?
he mimed like wiping her genitalia, and she just like dabbed her leg, and he shook his head no. I started. I was losing it because it was funny, but like you said, she showed the badge, and it was a bullshit badge, and immediately he was like, "Wait a second, show me that badge again," because she tried to do the kind of the comic book or the sitcom like quick flash of a badge and like hit it again real quick. But or like what it reminded me of was Doctor Who, how he always just had that blank sheet and he just and like
but even that it has the ability to make you think it says something it doesn't.
Even but it was just like a quick little like flash and then putting it back. But that whole sequence was great. And then I'm not entirely sure what their end game was, because they probably have some friend that can run DNA evidence or whatever, but were they planning on going to multiple trucks?
That's what was confusing to me. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what she said. She's like, I'm going to go to multiple truckers. And I'm like, what makes you think you're going to get out of this? I don't know any truckers personally, but I would assume that there's probably armed, as we saw with this character. He had a knife on her, and then when he falls down after she hits him, he pulls a gun. So I really don't know what the full plan was on that. That was, but because I was so amused at that character, I sort of was okay with it. Now, had he just been this trucker, I would have probably bitched a lot more about that scene. But because of him, I was entertained.
It was entertaining. It was okay.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I don't understand. Like, were they going to take something, label it, put it in the back of the truck, and her go to somebody else's truck? Like, I wasn't sure how they were going to investigate. Why did she pick that truck? Was there something identifying on that truck that would indicate that he was working with those people also? Because if there was something she noticed on that truck specifically, maybe it's multiple truckers that are working with Rick, and maybe this guy was involved, but I don't know, because they didn't really reveal what their plan was at all, other than to dress up like a prostitute and try to get DNA samples, I guess. I'm not even sure.
Another thing that made me laugh, she takes his pillow.
Yes.
I was laughing. I was like, this is horrible. Yet again, this was almost a Walker Texas Ranger moment. Like, I don't know. There was just the writing was a little odd for that scene.
They played it for laughs, which they kind of did. It worked. But like the end, when they were trying to be semi-serious with the I guess the police chief or whatever, that to me was less funny, because it didn't feel like it was played for laughs. It felt like it was just kind of I don't know, like hokey writing, whereas the trucker scene was played for laughs. Like, it was funny, and the guy falls on the ground and then pulls a gun out, and then Casper runs over like dropping. He's like, okay, after he get kicked in the nuts. It didn't seem like poor writing. It felt like it was legitimately intentionally played for laughs, and it was funny. But like I said, the end didn't feel that way.
Speaking of that cop, Sheriff Walter is the character, and he was in last week. He appeared several scenes in this episode. He's becoming a bigger presence on the show, trying to maintain order and all the chaos that's going on. We get the going back to Rick, this episode, I like what you said early on that, the sort of persona that Rick shows everyone, the BS persona, the real psychopath underneath started to get exposed in this episode. And we have the moment where, he's using, current political situations, and he just goes on about how he's being canceled, and he goes on this whole tirade at Walter's office. That was the beginning. That was, well, I guess the Ronald scene was sort of the beginning of seeing him fall apart. That scene, he really was falling apart, and then by a little later, I think it was later, he's almost having like panic attacks, and he's starting to really freak out. So, we're seeing him descent into madness, and I can't imagine him surviving this. I really, something's going to give. He's going to make a mistake, and I think it's going to get him killed. What do you think?
I agree 100%. I think that's how they're going to unveil the next, the next piece in the puzzle, the next higher up person. I think that when Rick dies, we're going to start finding out who the other important players are in this trafficking ring, whether they're the Canadian part of that, whoever they're working with in the U.S. If I'm not mistaken, didn't they say Ottawa? Didn't he say somebody from Ottawa?
They said something Canadian. I can't remember what they said.
Well, I'm just trying to think regionally, because he didn't say Calgary or Edmonton, which are the two big cities north of Montana. I think it's called it's spelled Regina, but I think they pronounce it like Regina, like vagina with R. But Regina's, just north of them too. But Ottawa is north of like New York. That's eastern Canada. That's the capital of Canada. And that is super far east. So somebody coming from all the way over there to get these girls, how big of a trafficking ring is this? And I started to think, if it's spread that much out throughout Canada, are they going to touch how far spread out it is in the U.S.? I don't know. But I am curious to see how big the trafficking ring is. Because, like I said, for it to go all the way to Eastern Canada from the Western United States is pretty big.
They mentioned, the church has come up in every episode, and yet we still don't have any concrete evidence that it's involved. Do you think it's involved? Because this episode got me really thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, that everybody keeps saying they're involved, but what if that's just something Rick's used? Because Rick doesn't seem to be answering to anyone locally, and that's why I asked that. Him and Ronald seem to be doing their own thing as far as that location. They're not meeting with the church members. They're not in any kind of conversations. They're doing everything there, and who they're communicating with is away, in Canada or wherever else. So I'm starting to think, is the church even involved? Maybe it is. This was the first time I started to think maybe it's not.
Well, and maybe it's just someone at the church. It might not be the church itself that's involved. It could be, some lower level. I don't know how that church's hierarchy works. I don't.
Yeah, it seems like people live there. It's a whole situation.
Yeah, very cultish. So I don't know what their second in charge would be, but it may be, a deacon that's working from inside the church. It may be the owner, but that's how basically he funds his church, and nobody else is even aware of that. Like, it could be just somebody from the church is involved. It doesn't necessarily have to be the church itself that's, funneling these people. I don't know.
Because I was thinking about the money, because if they're making money and it's decent money, we have no idea how much they're getting for this, but they got to put it somewhere. They're, Ronald and what I mean, Rick, if they're collecting all this money, where is it going? Are they just sitting on it, keeping it, somewhere? We do know that this particular exchange coming up there's no money involved.
It doesn't seem like a very lucrative business, because they had these 3 girls this whole time, and that's it. And it's been, some time has passed. So even, I don't know how much it's I don't want to say it because it sounds awful. Like, I don't know how much a human's worth.
Yeah,
Trafficking dollars, but I don't. Like, I don't know if they were to sell one of these people, I don't know how much they would go for. But to me, as far as they would only get a cut of that, because if they're working for someone, they're only getting a cut of that. So if it takes them a month to sell these three people, what are they going to get? Like $600? Like, it's not worth not only putting their lives in danger, but they're basically giving these people away because they don't want the trouble anymore. So
yeah. In this case, exactly.
So I'm like, that's not worth it.
Well,
Like, even
yeah.
I'm thinking, big illegal corporation wise, when you're thinking of drug runners, and you talk about like, Escobar, how many billions of dollars he just buried because he had too much money and was trying to keep the feds from taking it. That's a lot of money changing hands. This doesn't seem like very much money changing hands. I do it. That's my question now.
I'm very confused on the business, or that angle of this, how this thing works. How it works. I mean, I will say, I don't know about Ronald, but Rick did say, when he visited the girls, he went on that whole thing about moral decay. So for him, there is sort of a, I don't think it's necessarily for the money. He feels he's doing a service in doing this, but to convince Ronald to go along with it, and clearly for a ring to exist that's this large, there has to be several people involved, and there has to be a lot of money moving around, I would assume. I don't know. My hope is that in the next episode we get more information on how this thing operates. Now, what do you think about the fact that there's only one episode left until the break? I've been praising this episode in that, I feel like it's finally coming together and it's going in a direction I'm happy with. And now I only get one more episode, and then I got to wait, I think 5-6 weeks before it comes back. I think it's mid or late January.
That I think that once again, if they end it like they did with this episode and the first episode, and you keep ending with these cliffhanger type things, it'll keep me at least trying to figure it out for a couple weeks, and then I'll forget about it over Christmas and stuff. But once it gets closer to coming back on, it's going to be back in the forefront of my brain, as long as this next episode ends with a big unanswered question. Like, are they getting ready to find them, or they do find them and then they hear a noise, or you hear Rick like open the door when they're downstairs trying to rescue the girl, or Rick's trying to bury his wife because he killed her with that. Like, there's how the next episode ends, I think, will be the biggest thing for me going forward, how interested I am. I mean, I'm still going to finish it regardless because I'm still invested and I want to know how it ends, but whether I feel it's a chore to finish it or whether I enjoy it, it's going to be a different story.
Yeah, I completely agree. The next episode definitely will is a big deal. I think it's as important as the first episode in terms of maintaining an audience, because, like you said, we have the holidays, so people will be distracted, but then there's going to be a couple weeks and then it'll come back. But if this episode doesn't end in a way that makes people care to come back, they might not. So yeah, it's a very important episode. I'm curious to see what they're going to do. I'm pretty sure there is going to be some kind of big, major cliffhanger. I'd be shocked if there wasn't. So we definitely, like I said, after next week, there's 5 episodes left that'll start in late January. I'm pretty confident, we'll do that second half, unless the next episode is just the worst thing ever. But yeah, we'll do the second half. Any other
up and they go full Walker on us? Just
I don't know. It might be entertaining. Good. Yeah, I might be into it.
Keep watching.
I think I pretty much went through all my notes. Yeah, that's all I really have to say. Do you have any other thoughts on this episode?
Like I said earlier, I enjoyed this one. I've enjoyed all of them, but this one especially, just because of character development, and now we're finally seeing. To me, there's always a bad guy in a show. You got the antagonist and protagonist of kind of what makes the show happen because it gives you a purpose for the show. But in this episode, I finally felt like the antagonists in this show, like you said, were formidable. Like prior to, I was just like, you got some dumb, like, dumbass cop who's kind of bumbling shit and not very good at his job. And then you got this weird truck driver who's obsessed with his mother, kind of Norman Bates in it. Like, I was not really invested, although I did like the characters. I didn't feel they were imposing or formidable. This episode changed all of that. So I liked that kind of character development from both ends, the antagonist and protagonist in this series.
Yeah, I agree completely. We appreciate y'all listening. We, like I said, we'll be back next week with the mid-season finale of Big Sky. You can check out our Your Honor review on Sunday night. We'll be doing The Mandalorian Friday or Saturday, not sure which. Most of you seem to not care, which is fine. We enjoy it, and we will be starting The Stand. I believe it's next week when it airs. I want to say it's on Thursday nights, and we will try and get those up on Thursday nights. Not sure how they release. I'm not sure about the release schedule on the app, the CBS All Access app. I'll have to look into that, but we will be covering it. A lot of plans for 2021, and so yeah, please hit that sub button. Thanks for listening, and we will see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.